So, just last week, there was a major breakthrough in the PlayStation 4 hacking scene. A new jailbreak was announced for firmware 9.00. That's right, 9.00. This is a significant breakthrough. Generally speaking, PlayStation 4 exploits require much older versions of the firmware, with the most popular exploits requiring a firmware of 5.05. This would mean that games that ran after version 5.05 would require patches to run at the 5.05 firmware. Now, earlier this year, there were recent updates in the scene with a newer 7.55 firmware exploit, but these had issues with stability, and most people recommended staying on 5.05 if possible. But now, thanks to a file system exploit that was discovered in PlayStation 4 firmware 9.00, many PS4 owners who haven't updated to the latest 9.03 can jailbreak their console. And this jailbreak, I might add, is very stable, with only, at least in my experience, a very small chance of failure. And even then, you can just simply retry it and it will usually work the second time round. But what can you do with a modded PS4? Well, you may have heard about things like being able to run PT or Bloodborne at 60 FPS. Well, you can do that, and you can do a bunch more. And in today's episode, we're going to walk through some of the cool things you can do with a modded PlayStation 4 running 9.00. But first, let's quickly talk about the exploit and how it all works. The jailbreak was released on December the 13th with the following note. In this project, you will find an implementation that tries to make use of a file system bug for the PlayStation 4 on firmware 9.00. It will require a drive with a modified exFAT file system. Successfully triggering it will allow you to run arbitrary code as kernel, allowing jailbreaking and kernel level modifications to the system. Now, running the jailbreak is pretty simple. I don't want to cover it here because guides like this tend to go out of date fast. But if you want a step-by-step guide to jailbreaking your PS4 running 9.00, I will leave links to both Modded Warfare and Mr. Mario 2011. Both have made comprehensive step-by-step walkthrough guides on how to jailbreak your system. But the important part of this exploit is that it requires a drive with a modified exFAT file system. And in order to do this, all you will need is a USB stick. To run the exploit, you must simply write a binary file to the USB stick, which will provide our modified exFAT file system. And then we point the PS4's web browser to the following address. When prompted, we insert the USB stick into the PS4, wait for the prompt saying that it can't read, and then we press OK. And with any luck, the prompt will tell you that it's waiting for a payload. To do this, we can use a tool called Netcat to push a Homebrew enabler such as Goldhen to the PS4, and that's it, we're all done. To double check if it worked, go into the System Settings menu and you can see Goldhen on the top of the list, and from here the fun can really start. Now obviously, this is not a standalone jailbreak. It requires a USB flash drive as well as a PC to push the payload. What this means is every time you shut down the PlayStation 4, you will need to run the exploit again. But in my experience, so far at least, I've had success putting my PS4 into rest mode, and powering it back on, it will remain exploited. It's not ideal, but it works. And to be honest, the success rate of this exploit is so good that it's not really a huge deal running it over and over again if you need to. Now once you are running Goldhen, you can push other payloads to the PS4. And let me tell you, you'll want to do this, because things like game dumping tools, trainers and much more are at your disposal. So we've successfully jailbroken our 9.0 firmware PlayStation 4. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the really cool things that you can do with a modded PS4 in 2021. The starting point for any jailbroken PS4 is the package installer. Goldhen has an option to install package files, and you'll be using this feature a lot. All Homebrew and games that you download will require this. And here, you can even install things like PT, a small demo that was discontinued all the way back in 2015, and in danger of being lost forever. Now, as this is a demo, it's pretty easy to find online and reinstall it back onto your system, and it will be preserved forever. Now, running PT is really cool, but let's up the ante a little. Because the jailbreak is running on firmware 9, this means that you can pretty much dump the entire contents of disks to an external USB drive like this one here. Even current releases like Ghost of Tsushima will run on firmware 9 without any updates. Now, a specific payload known as AppDumper will dump the contents of the currently running disk-based game, where then you can use tools on your PC to create what is known as a fake package file. Via this package file, you can install this file back onto your jailbroken PS4 without ever requiring the disk again. One of the things I really like to mess around with on a modded PS4 is the ability to use trainers. Now, this is obviously something you can do to apply cheats to certain games, and there is a particular website out there that has cheats for pretty much any PlayStation 4 game on the market. Activating trainers on your jailbroken PS4 is pretty easy to do. First, you need to launch the game that you want to apply cheats to, then run a payload known as WebRTE 900. From here, simply browse to a website that contains all the games that have trainers and then search for your game. And then simply select the cheats that you want to apply. For example, in Final Fantasy VII Remake, I can easily enable things like Unlimited Gil and Max HP. And then from here, I can just go back into my game and play as normal.
Halt! Who goes there? You're up.
Or how about Infinite Blood Echoes in Bloodborne to max out the character's stats at level 99 across the board? I guess you could say that this is the easy mode that was never included in the game. It's pretty cool to mess around with this feature, and because it's only ever offline, this is not anything that would affect online multiplayer games. Now, because we have a modified PS4, that means that we can never connect to the PlayStation Network to download game updates. Because if we try to connect to PSN, the first thing that it's going to want us to do is update to the latest firmware. In this instance, that's 9.03. But once again, thanks to clever developers in the Homebrew community, with a simple tool known as Patch Installer, you can very easily download the latest patches for any game that's been installed onto your system. You can even delete the patch and roll back to a previous version. This makes it really easy to keep your games up to date, even when you're running on a jailbroken PlayStation 4. Now, you've probably heard about the 60 FPS patch for Bloodborne that was released by Lance McDonald, but the community has been releasing other 60 FPS patches, notably games like Final Fantasy VII Remake. So if you are interested, there are 60 FPS patches out for certain games, and Final Fantasy VII Remake was one I was interested in. Now, I will say there are a few steps that you have to take. First was to dump my original copy along with the 1.01 update, and then over on my PC, I had to use a tool to marry the 60 FPS patch file with the game, and then I installed it back onto my hard drive. But the result overall is worth it. It's immediately notable that the game runs smoother. Now, keep in mind that this is running on a base PS4, and a PS4 Pro would be much better suited to run this game at a more sustained frame rate. There are indeed slowdowns, and I don't think it's fair to expect a locked 60 FPS experience on base PS4, but it is what it is, and it's really cool to see the community developing 60 FPS patches for games that can transform the experience into something more playable. Now, of course, the GOAT of all 60 FPS patches does belong to Bloodborne, and like FF7 Remake, on base PS4 it does a pretty good job, but I would say that this is something that you must try out on any jailbroken PlayStation 4 system. And of course, we have emulators and Homebrew. There is a Homebrew store that's available that allows you to download things like RetroArch and many other different emulators and Homebrew titles. Now, the Homebrew store is definitely worth checking out. It contains a range of different Homebrew releases, emulators, and utilities, and there's quite a bit of stuff here. And of course, RetroArch on the PS4 is pretty good, as you would expect. And everything that is downloaded from the Homebrew store will be downloaded and installed as package files as normal, so you can simply just go into your UI and launch the game as you normally would. Now, it does go without saying that everything that you've seen will run on 9.00. The inevitable question will be, can I run this on 9.03? The answer to that is no. You'll never be able to run exploits on the most current firmware. This is because the exploits have already been disclosed to Sony via the HackerOne website. Security researchers will submit their findings to Sony and are offered bug bounties in return. This means that when the exploit is made public, Sony has already fixed them in a future firmware update. So for those people that are on 9.03, unfortunately you're out of luck. But I would suggest potentially waiting to see if another exploit is found. Now, it does go without saying that these exploits will also run on the PS4 Pro. The PS4 and the PS4 Pro, for all intents and purposes, are exactly the same thing. They run the exact same firmware and they have the exact same security issues. So everything that you've seen in this episode today will run on a 9.00 firmware PlayStation 4 Pro. So if you are interested, check out the 9.0 firmware jailbreak for the PlayStation 4. I definitely think you'll get a lot of enjoyment out of it, as I did, discovering all these cool things you can do on the channel today. But we are going to leave it here for this episode. Now, before I go, I've got a quick announcement. This is the last MVG video of the year. I'm taking a short break and we'll be back with videos starting on January the 3rd into the new year. So I just want to give a huge thank you to everyone that has followed the channel this year, watched the video, clicked the like button, left a comment. It doesn't matter. You guys have been absolutely amazing and fantastic, and I just want to give a huge thank you to everyone that has supported me not only this year but pretty much since the beginning. But that will do it for this episode, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked it, don't forget to put a like on it, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Bye for now.